Welcome to Softly Curious, a quiet place for those who cannot sleep or for those who choose to listen slowly. Tonight, we begin with pyramids. Some structures were never meant to serve daily life. They were not built for warmth, comfort, or protection from weather. They were built to remain. Pyramids belong to this category. Across thousands of years, across different cultures and continents, humans have returned to the same shape again and again. A form that rises upward, narrowing as it climbs, solid at its base, calm in its presence. Long before history was carefully recorded, humans began shaping stone with intention. Early communities were already familiar with building shelters and simple tombs. But pyramids were something different. They did not exist to house the living. They existed to mark something permanent, something meant to outlast a single lifetime. At their core, pyramids reflect a basic human concern: time. Humans are deeply aware of how temporary life is. From the earliest moments of organized society, people searched for ways to push against that reality. Pyramids were one such response. They were not attempts to escape death, but attempts to leave a trace beyond it. The earliest pyramid-like structures did not appear suddenly or perfectly formed. They emerged slowly, through experimentation. Simple graves became covered with small mounds. Over time, these mounds grew larger and more deliberate. Layers were added, stones were stacked, shapes were refined. What we now recognize as a pyramid was once a rough idea, explored gradually through repeated effort. In ancient Egypt, this process can be clearly observed. Early burial structures were flat and rectangular, known today as mastabas. These structures served a functional purpose, but they lacked the visual and symbolic power that later generations would seek. As rulers became more centralized and society more organized, the desire to build something greater began to take shape. The transition from simple tombs to stepped structures marked a turning point. The stepped pyramid was not merely a technical improvement. It represented a new way of thinking about space and form. Height became important. Visibility mattered. These structures were meant to be seen from a distance, standing apart from their surroundings. Yet even these early pyramids were imperfect. Many collapsed. Others suffered from structural weaknesses. Builders were still learning how stone behaved under immense weight. They tested angles, adjusted proportions, and experimented with different construction techniques. Each failure contributed to a growing understanding of stability. Over generations, the pyramid shape evolved. Smoother surfaces replaced steps. Angles became more precise. The base grew wider, and the structure rose higher. This gradual refinement suggests that pyramids were not the result of a single moment of inspiration. They were the outcome of long-term observation, patience, and accumulated knowledge. Importantly, the pyramid shape was not chosen randomly. From an engineering perspective, it is one of the most stable forms humans can build using simple tools. Weight is distributed downward and outward, reducing stress on any single point. This makes pyramids resistant to collapse, erosion, and even earthquakes. For early builders seeking permanence, the pyramid offered an intuitive solution. But engineering alone does not explain why societies invested so much effort into these structures. Pyramids required vast amounts of labor, coordination, and resources. Entire communities were organized around their construction. This suggests that pyramids held deep cultural and symbolic meaning. In many ancient belief systems, height was associated with the divine. The sky represented order, eternity, and power beyond human reach. By building upward, pyramids created a visual connection between the earth and the heavens. They stood as intermediaries between the human world and something greater. Pyramids also communicated authority. Their scale alone demonstrated control over people and resources. To build one required planning, discipline, and social organization. In this sense, Pyramids were statements of power, made visible in stone. They reinforced hierarchy and reinforced belief systems that placed rulers at the center of cosmic order. What makes pyramids even more intriguing is that they did not appear in isolation. Similar structures emerged independently in different parts of the world. In Central America, stepped pyramids rose above cities. In parts of Asia, pyramid-like forms were constructed for ritual and burial purposes. These cultures had no direct contact with one another, yet they arrived at remarkably similar solutions. This repetition raises important questions. Why did humans across different environments choose the same basic form? Why not towers, domes, or arches? The answer likely lies in a combination of practicality and symbolism. The pyramid is easy to conceptualize, stable to build, and visually powerful. It satisfies both structural and psychological needs. Pyramids also endure because of their simplicity. There are no delicate elements that can easily break away. Their mass protects them. As centuries pass, details erode, but the core remains. This endurance reinforces their symbolic role as markers of time itself. For people living alongside these structures, pyramids would have shaped daily experience. They were not distant monuments visited on special occasions, but constant presences in the landscape. From roads, fields, and homes, the pyramid remained visible. Its size quietly influenced how space itself was perceived. They dominated the landscape in a way that few structures ever have. The horizon no longer felt neutral or empty, but deliberately shaped. Stone altered the sense of distance and direction. The pyramid became a fixed reference point in daily life. They reminded individuals of the past, not through stories or writing, but through physical endurance. Generations passed while the structure remained unchanged. This contrast between permanence and human fragility was impossible to ignore. The pyramid became a silent witness to time. They also reminded people of forces larger than themselves. Authority, belief, and the unknown were embedded into the structure. The pyramid did not explain these forces. It simply stood as proof that they mattered. Even today, standing before a pyramid creates a sense of scale that is difficult to ignore. The structure slows movement and alters perception. Silence feels heavier in its presence. The experience is less about observation and more about awareness. Before questions of how pyramids were built, or whether hidden knowledge was involved, there is a more fundamental question to consider. This question existed long before modern measurements or tools. It concerns intention rather than technique. Why did humans feel compelled to build them at all? Why invest such effort into structures that offered no immediate practical benefit? They did not provide shelter, food, or protection. Their purpose was not survival in the short term. And yet, entire societies committed themselves to their construction. One possible answer lies in the human relationship with time. Humans are uniquely aware of their own impermanence. From early history onward, this awareness shaped belief and behavior. Pyramids can be seen as responses to that awareness. The answer may lie in the desire to be remembered. Pyramids were acts of defiance against impermanence. They were attempts to anchor identity in a changing world. Through stone, humans sought continuity. In this sense, pyramids are not mysteries because we lack information. Many technical details are known and documented. They remain mysterious because they reflect motivations that are deeply human. Motivations that resist simple explanation. They sit at the intersection of fear, belief, ambition, and creativity. They reveal how societies combine technical skill with existential concern. Architecture became expression. Stone became meaning. Understanding the origins of pyramids means understanding something about ourselves. Not just how ancient people built, but why they felt the need to build at all. Before we examine construction methods or theories, we must recognize intention. Pyramids are answers to a question humans have asked since the beginning. Looking at pyramids through a modern lens can be misleading. Today, large structures are often judged by efficiency or practical return. In the ancient world, meaning alone justified effort. Building was not always about solving a problem. Sometimes it was simply about expressing an idea in a permanent form. For early societies, shared labor carried symbolic weight. Working together on something that would never serve daily life reinforced collective belief. The pyramid was not only a structure, but a social act. It brought people into alignment around a purpose larger than any individual lifespan. Those who built the earliest pyramids likely did not think of them as mysteries. They were responding to values that felt obvious at the time. Permanence mattered. Visibility mattered. Connection to unseen forces mattered. The pyramid was the form that allowed those values to exist in stone. As generations passed, meaning accumulated. What began as a response to death and remembrance expanded into symbols of power, order, and continuity. Each society inherited not just the structure, but the intention behind it. The pyramid became tradition, expectation, and legacy at once. This is why pyramids feel timeless. They were designed to exist outside the rhythm of ordinary life. They were never meant to be hurried, consumed, or fully resolved. Their presence encourages stillness rather than answers. As pyramids took shape in the ancient world, they gradually changed how people understood effort and scale. These were not structures that could be completed quickly or individually. Their construction required patience, measured not in days, but in generations. This alone set pyramids apart from anything built for ordinary use. The decision to begin such a project meant accepting that many who worked on it would never see it finished. Stones were placed by hands that understood their role as temporary. This introduced a different relationship with time, one where contribution mattered more than completion. In this way, pyramids reshaped how societies thought about legacy. They also altered how space was organized. Settlements, roads, and ritual paths began to orient themselves around these structures. The pyramid became a center, not just geographically, but symbolically. Life moved in relation to it, even when it was not directly involved. As construction continued, meaning deepened. The act of building itself became ritualized. Labor was no longer just physical effort, but participation in something enduring. Each stone carried not only weight, but intention. Over time, this transformed the pyramid from a project into a presence. This presence extended beyond the living. Pyramids created a bridge between generations, allowing memory to exist without words. Long after names were forgotten, the structure remained. In this way, pyramids preserved identity through form rather than narrative. Importantly, this way of building required restraint. Precision mattered, but speed did not. Progress was slow, deliberate, and often invisible. The pyramid grew quietly, without urgency. This pace reinforced the idea that its purpose lay beyond immediate reward. By the time a pyramid neared completion, it already belonged to the past and the future at once. It carried the labor of those long gone and the expectations of those yet to come. Standing between these timelines, it became a marker of continuity. It is within this extended process, slow, collective, and intentional, that the deeper meaning of pyramids begins to emerge. Not as monuments to individual achievement, but as shared commitments to something lasting. Before attention turns to tools, measurements, or construction methods, there is value in pausing here. To recognize that pyramids did not begin with technique. They began with a decision to build something that time itself would have to reckon with. From this quiet intention, everything else follows. The pyramid did not begin as a clear idea. It emerged slowly through repetition, uncertainty, and adjustment. Long before smooth surfaces and precise geometry, there were experiments shaped by limited knowledge and cautious ambition. The earliest stages of pyramid building reflect a period where intention existed, but mastery had not yet arrived. In the earliest phases of organized society, burial architecture was grounded and practical. Structures were designed to protect the dead and mark their presence, not to dominate the landscape. These early forms remained close to the earth, emphasizing stability over height. At this point, architecture followed necessity rather than aspiration. In ancient Egypt, these early burial structures became known as mastabas. Rectangular and low, they were constructed from mud brick or stone and featured flat roofs with gently sloping sides. Their design prioritized endurance and accessibility. They were symbols of remembrance, but modest in scale and ambition. As Egyptian society evolved, so did its relationship with power and belief. Authority became increasingly centralized, and rulers were no longer seen merely as leaders, but as figures with divine connections. This shift created new demands on architecture. Structures now needed to express hierarchy, permanence, and cosmic order. The mastaba, while effective, lacked visual distinction. Its horizontal form blended into the environment rather than rising above it. Over time, this limitation became evident. Height began to take on symbolic importance, representing elevation in both physical and social terms. Early builders did not abandon existing methods. Instead, they adapted them. Mastabas were stacked, one atop another, forming step structures that gradually rose higher. This approach relied on familiar construction techniques while extending their possibilities. Each added layer increased visibility and symbolic presence. These early stepped forms mark a crucial transitional phase. They reflect a willingness to experiment beyond proven limits. Builders were no longer content with stability alone. They sought prominence, visibility, and differentiation. The stepped pyramid associated with King Djoser exemplifies this stage. Archaeological evidence indicates that its design evolved throughout construction. Sections were expanded, modified, and reconfigured. The final structure reflects an adaptive process rather than a predetermined plan. This adaptability was necessary because early experiments revealed numerous challenges. As structures increased in height, stresses multiplied. Foundations behaved unpredictably under greater weight. Materials responded differently when used at larger scales. Each project introduced new uncertainties. Failure was an expected part of this process. Some early pyramids experienced partial collapses. Others developed cracks or structural weaknesses that became apparent over time. These outcomes were not concealed. They became part of the learning process. Builders relied on observation rather than formal theory. There were no written architectural manuals or mathematical models. Knowledge developed through practice, passed down through experience. Techniques were refined through repetition and correction. This experiential learning explains the wide variation seen in early pyramid forms. Proportions differed significantly. Angles were inconsistent. No two early pyramids followed identical designs. Each structure embodied the lessons available at the time of its construction. Gradually, patterns began to emerge. Builders noticed that wider bases improved stability. They observed that steep angles increased internal stress. These insights informed future decisions. Design choices became more deliberate. The transition from stepped pyramids to smooth-sided forms represented a significant conceptual shift. Removing the visible steps altered how weight traveled through the structure. Without horizontal breaks, pressure moved continuously downward. This increased both risk and complexity. Early attempts at smooth-sided pyramids revealed these challenges clearly. Some projects began with ambitious inclines that proved unstable. As construction progressed, signs of structural strain appeared. Adjustments became necessary. The bent pyramid stands as a clear record of this learning process. Its change in angle reflects a response to emerging instability. Builders altered the design mid-construction to preserve the structure. This decision prioritized endurance over symmetry. Such corrections demonstrate growing confidence. Builders were no longer simply experimenting. They were diagnosing problems and responding effectively. Construction became a dialogue between intention and observation. Despite these advancements, uncertainty remained constant. Materials varied in quality depending on location. Limestone differed in hardness and durability. Choices made early in construction had consequences that unfolded slowly. Transporting stone added further complexity. Without wheeled vehicles or modern machinery, builders depended on coordinated human effort. Seasonal flooding influenced transportation routes. Labor availability fluctuated with agricultural demands. These constraints shaped construction rhythms. Work progressed in stages rather than continuously. Builders learned to align construction schedules with natural cycles. This influenced both planning and execution. Labor organization itself evolved through experimentation. Early projects tested the limits of coordination. Over time, specialized roles emerged. Stone cutters, transport crews, planners, and overseers became distinct functions within a growing system. Through this process, pyramid construction transformed society. It required cooperation on an unprecedented scale. Individuals worked toward goals they would never personally benefit from. Collective effort became normalized. Failure played a critical role in refining these systems. When structures faltered, weaknesses became visible. These moments informed future planning. Mistakes became reference points rather than setbacks. As knowledge accumulated, builders developed an intuitive understanding of structural behavior. They learned how stone responded to pressure and placement. This understanding was embodied through practice rather than theory. With increased confidence came visual refinement. Surfaces grew smoother. Lines became more consistent. Proportions stabilized. The pyramid began to resemble the form we recognize today. This refinement enhanced symbolic impact. Smooth faces reflected light differently. The structure interacted more dramatically with the sky. Its presence became more commanding. Symbolism evolved alongside technique. The pyramid's form came to represent order, permanence, and authority. Architecture became a language through which power and belief were expressed. At the same time, the pyramid's endurance contrasted sharply with human transience. While individual lives passed quickly, the structure remained. This contrast deepened its symbolic meaning. Despite increasing mastery, experimentation never fully ceased. Each new pyramid introduced subtle variations. Builders adjusted proportions and methods cautiously. Innovation continued within established boundaries. Looking back, it becomes clear that pyramids were not inevitable. Other forms could have emerged. The pyramid endured because it consistently met both practical and symbolic needs. Early experiments reveal a process defined by persistence rather than inspiration. Mastery was earned gradually. Confidence grew from experience. This extended period of experimentation laid the groundwork for later achievements. Without early failures, later successes would not have been possible. Imperfection was essential. Seen in this light, early pyramids are not incomplete versions of later ones. They are foundational chapters in a long narrative. Each attempt contributed to collective understanding. The pyramid began not as an answer, but as a question explored repeatedly through stone and labor. What form could endure? What structure could carry meaning across time? Through these early experiments, uncertainty was transformed into knowledge. Builders moved from hesitation toward intention. Construction became increasingly deliberate. As pyramid construction progressed beyond its earliest experimental phase, builders began to rely on accumulated experience rather than improvisation. Archaeological evidence shows that later projects reused proven foundation layouts, quarry locations, and transport routes. This reuse signals an important shift. Knowledge was no longer isolated to individual projects, but had become transferable. One clear indicator of this transition is consistency. Later pyramids display more uniform base dimensions and more predictable angles. While early structures varied widely, later ones cluster around specific proportions that balance height and stability. This suggests that builders had identified practical limits and chose to work within them. Material selection also became more deliberate. Limestone from certain quarries was preferred for outer casings, while heavier core stones were sourced locally to reduce transport strain. These decisions reflect an understanding of material behavior rather than simple availability. Stone was chosen not only for strength, but for how it aged over time. Tool marks and construction traces indicate increased precision. Stone blocks in later phases show more regular cutting patterns and tighter joints. This improvement did not require advanced tools, but better coordination and skill. Repetition refined technique. Evidence from worker settlements suggests growing specialization. Some groups focused exclusively on quarrying, others on transport, others on placement. This division of labor increased efficiency and reduced error. Pyramid construction became an organized system rather than an ad hoc effort. Seasonal planning also improved. Builders aligned major transport phases with Nile flooding cycles, using water to move heavy materials more easily. Construction schedules adapted to agricultural rhythms, ensuring labor availability without disrupting food production. This coordination reflects logistical intelligence rather than brute force. As methods stabilized, planning horizons expanded. Builders could now estimate timelines more reliably. This allowed for larger projects with fewer interruptions. Confidence in process reduced the need for constant redesign. Alignment accuracy further supports this shift. Later pyramids show more consistent orientation to cardinal directions. While not perfect, the precision suggests standardized surveying methods and repeated verification during construction. Accuracy became a goal rather than a fortunate outcome. Internal layouts also became more predictable. Passage angles, chamber placement, and load-relieving features followed patterns refined through earlier failures. Structural stress was managed intentionally rather than discovered accidentally. Importantly, this growing competence did not eliminate risk. Builders continued to monitor structures during construction, adjusting when necessary. However, corrections became smaller and more controlled. The scale of uncertainty narrowed. Social organization evolved alongside technical refinement. Large-scale construction required stable administrative systems capable of coordinating labor, materials, and time. Written records, marks on stone, and standardized measurements point to emerging bureaucratic oversight. This institutional memory allowed knowledge to persist beyond individual lifetimes. Skills were taught, not rediscovered. Techniques survived political change. Pyramid construction became repeatable. As refinement replaced experimentation, pyramids began to function as benchmarks rather than tests. Each new structure confirmed established methods while allowing for incremental improvement. Innovation became cautious and deliberate. This period represents a quiet transformation. The pyramid ceased to be an open-ended question and became a controlled endeavor. Builders no longer asked whether such structures were possible. They asked how reliably they could be executed. It is at this moment that pyramid construction crosses a threshold. The form remains powerful, but the uncertainty surrounding it diminishes. What once demanded bold experimentation now depends on disciplined repetition. By the end of this phase, the pyramid was no longer an experiment. It was an established possibility. From this point forward, builders would refine rather than discover. And with that shift, pyramid construction entered an entirely new stage. When people ask how the pyramids were built, The question often carries disbelief. The scale feels overwhelming. The precision seems unlikely, and the time period appears too distant to reconcile with such ambition. Yet the evidence left behind tells a quieter, more grounded story. The pyramids were not built through unknown forces, but through systems carefully organized, patiently applied, and repeated over long periods of time. Construction began with choice. Not every place along the Nile was suitable for a pyramid. Builders selected sites with firm bedrock, capable of supporting immense weight without shifting. Proximity to the river mattered as much as stability. The Nile was not just a source of water, but a transportation network, shaping every major construction decision. Before stone was moved, the land itself was prepared. Archaeological surveys revealed that pyramid bases were leveled with remarkable consistency. This was achieved using simple methods: shallow trenches filled with water, measuring rods, and repeated checks across the surface. The goal was uniformity rather than perfection. A stable base reduced long-term risk more than any later correction could. Stone sourcing followed. The majority of pyramid blocks were cut from nearby limestone quarries. These stones were not identical in size or shape, but they were consistent enough to be stacked efficiently. Harder stones, such as granite, were reserved for internal chambers and structural stress points. Their limited use reflects both their value and the difficulty of working them. Quarrying was slow and methodical. Workers used copper chisels, stone hammers, and wooden wedges. In some cases, grooves were cut into rock faces and wooden wedges inserted. When soaked with water, the wood expanded, splitting the stone along natural fractures. This technique required patience rather than strength, and its traces remain visible in unfinished quarries. Once cut, stone blocks had to be transported. This was among the most demanding stages of construction. Without wheels or metal machinery, builders relied on sledges pulled across prepared surfaces. Evidence from wall reliefs shows workers pouring water onto sand in front of sledges, reducing friction and making movement more efficient. This simple adjustment significantly reduced required force. The Nile played a central role in long-distance transport. During seasonal floods, canals and temporary harbors allowed stone to be moved by boat. This natural cycle was integrated into construction planning. Heavy materials were moved when water levels were high, reducing strain on labor and equipment. At the building site, organization became critical. Stone blocks arrived in large numbers and had to be placed in precise sequences. Construction did not proceed one block at a time from bottom to top. Instead, multiple levels were worked on simultaneously. This allowed teams to operate in parallel, increasing efficiency and maintaining momentum. Ramps were used to raise stone to higher levels. While no single ramp design has been definitively proven, archaeological evidence supports their use in various forms. Straight ramps likely served lower levels, while angled or spiraling ramps may have been used as the structure rose. These ramps were temporary, built from mud brick, rubble, and limestone chips. The absence of surviving ramps has often been misinterpreted as evidence against their existence. In reality, temporary structures were dismantled as construction progressed. Their materials were reused or eroded over time. The pyramid remained. The ramps did not. Labor organization reveals another layer of planning. Contrary to long-standing myths, pyramids were not built by enslaved populations. Excavations of worker settlements show evidence of permanent housing, food production, and medical care. Workers received regular meals and treatment for injuries, indicating sustained support. Teams were divided by function and rotated regularly. Some groups specialized in quarrying, others in transport, others in placement. Skilled craftsmen handled precise tasks such as cutting casing stones and constructing internal chambers. This division of labor reduced errors and increased consistency. Food logistics were extensive. Large bakeries, breweries, and storage facilities supplied bread, beer, and meat. Feeding thousands of workers required centralized administration and reliable supply chains. Pyramid construction was as much a logistical achievement as an architectural one. Alignment was another key concern. Most pyramids are oriented closely to the cardinal directions. This was achieved using astronomical observation rather than magnetic tools. By tracking the movement of stars or the shadow of the sun, builders established true north with impressive accuracy. This alignment was checked repeatedly during construction. Internal spaces were constructed as the pyramid rose. Passageways, chambers, and relieving spaces were planned in advance. Massive stone beams were placed above burial chambers to redirect weight away from open areas. This technique prevented collapse and demonstrates an understanding of load distribution. Construction was monitored continuously. Builders watched for stress, settling, and shifting. When problems appeared, adjustments were made. Changes in angle, reinforcement of internal spaces, and alterations to layout all reflect responsive decision-making rather than rigid adherence to plans. Time was an essential factor. Pyramid construction spanned years, often decades. Work followed seasonal rhythms, pausing during agricultural peaks and intensifying when labor was available. Progress was steady, but not rushed. The pyramid grew gradually, layer by layer. What makes this process remarkable is not any single technique, but coordination. Quarrying, transport, placement, alignment, and finishing had to work in concert. A failure in one stage could affect all others. Success depended on sustained organization over long periods. The pyramid was not built through sudden breakthroughs. It was built through repetition. Tasks were performed thousands of times, refining technique through practice. Small efficiencies accumulated into major progress. Mistakes occurred, but they were instructive. Blocks were repositioned. Angles were adjusted. Each project benefited from lessons learned in previous ones. Knowledge was not written down in manuals, but carried through experience. At this stage, pyramid construction was no longer experimental, but it was not yet fully standardized. Builders understood what worked, but continued to observe and refine. The process balanced confidence with caution. Understanding how pyramids were built does not remove their mystery. Instead, it shifts it. The wonder lies not in unknown technology, but in sustained human effort applied at extraordinary scale. And even with this understanding, questions remain not about whether pyramids could be built, but about how consistently and efficiently such systems could operate over generations. This is where the story deepens. As pyramid construction progressed, the central challenge shifted from individual tasks to coordination. Stone could already be cut and moved. The real difficulty now lay in synchronizing thousands of actions over long periods of time. Building a pyramid required timing as much as labor, with each stage depending on the stability of the one before it. Construction advanced in deliberate horizontal layers. This approach allowed builders to monitor balance and correct problems early, before they became structural threats. Precision was achieved gradually, through repeated adjustment rather than force. Stones were eased into place, guided carefully, not rushed. To reach higher levels, ramps evolved alongside the pyramid itself. These temporary structures were extended, reshaped, and reinforced as needed. Their constant modification reflects adaptive planning rather than fixed design. The pyramid and its support systems grew together. Internal spaces were integrated during construction, not carved afterward. Chambers and passages had to be planned in advance, with weight carefully redirected around them. Large stone beams and angled blocks relieved pressure, ensuring that open spaces remained stable within the growing mass. Alignment was maintained throughout the process. Builders repeatedly checked orientation, using the sky as reference, correcting small deviations before they accumulated. Accuracy came from repetition and attention, not from a single perfect measurement. Surface finishing played both a protective and symbolic role. Smooth casing stones unified the structure visually and shielded inner blocks from erosion. Evidence suggests these stones were often placed from above, using gravity to assist precision rather than brute effort. The organization behind this work was extensive. Labor was divided, rotated, and sustained over years. Workers were housed, fed, and cared for, allowing construction to continue without exhausting its workforce. Pyramid building became a managed system, not a temporary effort. As experience accumulated, confidence grew. Builders could anticipate outcomes and limit risk, even though uncertainty never disappeared entirely. Construction became repeatable, adaptable, and increasingly controlled. What emerges from this process is not a single ingenious method, but a network of systems working together. Quarrying, transport, placement, alignment, and maintenance all depended on coordination across time. Seen this way, pyramid construction is less about spectacle and more about discipline. The achievement lies not in isolated moments of brilliance, but in sustained organization. Each small action mattered because it was part of a larger whole. Understanding this shifts the mystery. The question is no longer how stone was moved, but how such complex efforts were maintained for generations. And it is at this edge, between what we can trace and what remains uncertain, that curiosity continues to grow. Even after centuries of study, pyramids continue to resist complete understanding. This is not because they are impenetrable, but because each answer seems to reveal another unanswered question. The deeper scholars look, the clearer it becomes that pyramid construction was not only a technical achievement, but a convergence of decisions whose full reasoning has not survived. One of the most discussed mysteries concerns precision. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with extraordinary accuracy. The deviation is so small that it challenges assumptions about ancient surveying limits. While methods using stars are known, maintaining that level of alignment throughout decades of construction remains difficult to fully reconstruct. Precision extends beyond orientation. The base of the Great Pyramid is remarkably level, with minimal variation across its entire footprint. Achieving this over such a large area required not only careful measurement, but consistent verification. How builders ensured this consistency without modern instruments remains partially unclear. Geometry adds another layer of uncertainty. The slope angles of major pyramids are not arbitrary. They follow repeatable patterns that balance stability and height. Some of these proportions align closely with mathematical relationships that were not formally defined until much later. Whether these results were intentional or emergent is still debated. The internal layout of pyramids deepens the mystery. Passageways change direction unexpectedly. Chambers are positioned asymmetrically. Certain spaces appear carefully finished, while others seem abruptly abandoned. These inconsistencies suggest that internal design was influenced by factors beyond simple structural necessity. Above the king's chamber, a series of relieving chambers was constructed using massive granite beams. Their purpose is understood: to redirect weight. Yet the complexity of their arrangement exceeds what might be expected from a purely functional solution. Why such effort was invested in invisible spaces remains an open question. Material selection raises further uncertainties. Granite, transported from distant quarries, was used sparingly but strategically. Its hardness made it difficult to work, yet it appears in critical locations. This choice suggests considerations beyond convenience, but the balance between symbolic and structural motivation is still unclear. Tool marks present a puzzling contrast. Some stones show rough, hurried cutting. Others display remarkable smoothness and precision. This variation occurs within the same structure. The coexistence of careful craftsmanship and apparent haste complicates simple explanations. The casing stones, now mostly missing, represent another unresolved element. Historical accounts describe smooth outer surfaces that reflected light. Surviving examples show joints so tight that even thin blades cannot be inserted between stones. How such consistency was achieved across thousands of blocks remains debated. Scale continues to challenge interpretation. The sheer number of stones involved, combined with their average weight, creates logistical demands that stretch modern intuition. Even with accepted methods, coordinating such volume within limited time frames remains difficult to visualize. Time itself is a source of uncertainty. Estimates of construction duration vary. Some suggest decades, others longer. Without definitive records, scholars rely on indirect evidence. Reconciling workforce size, available technology, and construction pace remains an ongoing challenge. Administrative organization is partially visible but incomplete. Worker settlements, food production sites, and tool remains indicate structured management. Yet the mechanisms by which information flowed across such large projects are not fully understood. Written records deepen the mystery by their absence. Ancient Egypt produced extensive inscriptions, yet detailed accounts of pyramid construction are notably missing. This silence may reflect cultural priorities rather than secrecy, but it leaves a significant gap. Astronomical elements add further complexity. Narrow shafts align toward regions of the sky associated with specific stars as they appeared thousands of years ago. Whether these alignments were symbolic, functional, or coincidental remains debated. Acoustic behavior inside certain chambers is unusual. Sounds resonate in unexpected ways. These effects may be incidental, but their consistency invites speculation about intentional design. Thermal stability within pyramids is another unresolved aspect. Internal temperatures fluctuate far less than the external environment. While mass explains much of this effect, the uniformity remains striking. Structural corrections visible within some pyramids suggest mid-construction problem solving. Blocks were repositioned, angles adjusted. These changes indicate adaptive decision-making, but also imply challenges that were not anticipated. Void detection technologies have revealed previously unknown spaces within pyramids. These voids raise questions about purpose and design. Whether they are structural, symbolic, or incidental remains unknown. Surrounding complexes add contextual mystery. Causeways, temples, and subsidiary pyramids form integrated systems. The coordination required to design and build these elements together is difficult to fully reconstruct. Cultural continuity compounds uncertainty. Pyramid construction evolved over centuries, yet core principles persisted. How knowledge was preserved across generations without formal documentation remains unclear. Symbolism complicates interpretation at every level. Many features can be explained structurally, symbolically, or both. Distinguishing intention from necessity is often impossible. Modern technology has expanded knowledge while preserving mystery. Each scan and survey reveals more detail, but also more questions. The pyramids resist closure. Importantly, mystery does not imply the impossible. These structures do not require lost civilizations to inspire wonder. Their mystery lies in human decision-making under extreme constraints. What remains most elusive is motivation. Why devote such effort to structures that offered no practical return? The answer lies partly in belief systems that prioritized permanence over utility. The pyramids reflect values that differ sharply from modern priorities. Time was measured differently. Legacy mattered more than efficiency. These differences shape interpretation. Silence plays a role. The pyramids offer no explanation of themselves. They endure without instruction, inviting projection as much as analysis. As scholarship advances, mystery shifts rather than disappears. Some questions fade as evidence grows clearer, while others deepen with every new discovery. The pyramids remain slightly beyond full comprehension, not because they defy explanation, but because they continue to challenge it. This tension between knowledge and uncertainty is central to their power. The pyramids are neither unsolved riddles nor fully explained structures. They exist in a space where understanding is possible, but never complete. At this point, what can be supported by evidence begins to give way to interpretation. Patterns are noticed. Connections are suggested. Meanings are proposed that reach beyond stone and structure. It is here that certainty softens, and imagination quietly enters the conversation. And from this threshold, a different kind of mystery begins to unfold. Beyond what can be cautiously explained, pyramids continue to generate questions that sit at the edge of accepted knowledge. These are not questions born from fantasy alone, but from patterns, observations, and recurring inconsistencies that resist simple dismissal. They occupy a space where certainty fades, yet curiosity remains grounded. One of the most widely discussed ideas involves the spatial relationship between pyramids and the sky. Some researchers have noted similarities between the arrangement of pyramids on the Giza plateau and the pattern of certain stars as they appeared in ancient times. The comparison is not exact, yet the resemblance is strong enough to provoke debate. Whether this alignment was intentional, symbolic, or coincidental remains unresolved. Ancient Egyptian culture placed great importance on the sky. Stars were associated with eternity, order, and the afterlife. The idea that monumental architecture might mirror celestial patterns is not foreign to their worldview. Temples, rituals, and myths frequently reference the heavens. Within this context, the possibility of sky-based symbolism embedded in pyramid placement cannot be dismissed outright. Critics argue that pattern recognition can be misleading. Humans naturally seek meaning, especially when confronted with complexity. Similarities may emerge by chance, reinforced by selective interpretation. Yet the persistence of these comparisons keeps the discussion alive, not because they prove a theory, but because they align so closely with known cultural priorities. Another area of intrigue lies in the internal sensory experience of pyramids. Visitors and researchers have long noted unusual acoustic behavior within certain chambers. Sounds resonate more deeply than expected. Vibrations linger. In some spaces, low-frequency tones seem amplified. While these effects can be explained through geometry and stone mass, their consistency raises questions about intentionality. Sound held ritual significance in ancient cultures. Chanting, rhythm, and spoken word were integral to ceremonies. The idea that architecture might enhance or shape sound is not implausible. Whether pyramid interiors were designed with acoustic awareness remains uncertain, but the experience itself continues to invite speculation. Closely related are claims about vibration and resonance. Some suggest that pyramids may interact with natural frequencies of the earth or human body. Scientific evidence for such effects at meaningful levels is limited. However, the combination of enclosed stone spaces and massive structures creates environments unlike ordinary buildings. These environments affect perception in subtle ways that are difficult to measure. Thermal behavior adds another layer of curiosity. Pyramids maintain relatively stable internal temperatures despite extreme external fluctuations. This phenomenon is largely explained by mass and insulation. Yet the uniformity of this stability across large internal volumes remains striking. It creates an environment that feels removed from ordinary time and weather. Some observers have reported sensations of altered perception within pyramids. Feelings of disorientation, calm, or heightened awareness are frequently described. These experiences vary widely and are subjective. They may result from darkness, silence, scale, or expectation. Still, their recurrence contributes to the pyramid's mystique. The question of scale itself often leads to deeper speculation. Why such enormous structures for single individuals? Practical explanations focus on power and belief. Yet the emotional impact of scale suggests an intention to overwhelm to inspire awe, to dwarf the individual. The psychological dimension of pyramid design remains difficult to quantify. Certain construction choices also appear excessive by practical standards. The effort invested in internal spaces that would rarely be seen raises questions about audience. Who were these spaces for? The living, the dead, the gods, or something more abstract? These questions resist definitive answers. Some stones display levels of precision that exceed structural necessity. Joints so tight they admit almost no variation suggest a standard beyond mere stability. Why such care was taken in invisible areas remains unclear. Symbolic completeness, ritual purity, or adherence to belief systems may have played roles. The idea of intentional complexity emerges repeatedly. False passages, blocked corridors, and sealed chambers complicate internal layouts. While security is often cited, these features may also have served symbolic or ritual purposes. Confusion itself may have been meaningful. The absence of certain expected features adds to the mystery. No clear instructional texts describe pyramid construction. No detailed blueprints have survived. This silence contrasts sharply with other aspects of Egyptian record-keeping. Why some knowledge was preserved and other knowledge was not remains open to interpretation. Modern scanning technologies have revealed voids within pyramids that were previously unknown. These spaces do not fit neatly into existing models. Their purpose is unclear. They may serve structural functions, represent unfinished plans, or hold symbolic meaning. Each possibility invites further questions. Speculation intensifies when these voids are considered alongside known complexities. The pyramids appear both meticulously planned and adaptable. This combination challenges linear narratives of construction. It suggests a process responsive to changing circumstances and evolving intention. Another recurring idea involves the relationship between pyramids and the landscape itself. The placement of structures relative to the Nile, the horizon, and surrounding temples creates patterns that feel deliberate. Whether these patterns encode meaning or simply reflect practical planning is debated. The pyramid's visibility across vast distances further reinforces their symbolic role. They were designed to be seen, not just approached. This visual dominance shaped experience long before direct contact. The landscape itself became part of the architecture. Time perception also plays a role in pyramid mystery. These structures were built to endure far beyond human lifespans. Their scale compresses generations into a single presence. This long-term perspective differs radically from modern construction priorities. Some theories suggest that pyramids functioned as symbolic machines rather than literal ones. Not devices that produce energy, but structures that organize meaning. Their form may encode ideas about order, ascent, and permanence. These interpretations resist empirical testing, yet remain compelling. Cultural memory influences how pyramids are interpreted. Over centuries, layers of meaning accumulated. Greek historians, medieval travelers, and modern researchers all brought their own frameworks. The pyramids became mirrors reflecting each era's concerns. This accumulation complicates modern analysis. Separating ancient intention from later interpretation is difficult. Some mysteries may be products of historical layering rather than original design. Despite this, certain questions persist across time. Why such precision? Why such scale? Why such endurance? These questions survive because they point to motivations that are not purely practical. Importantly, none of these mysteries require abandoning rational thought. They do not demand lost civilizations or advanced technology. They arise naturally when human ambition meets extreme conditions and symbolic thinking. The pyramids challenge modern assumptions about what ancient societies valued. Efficiency was secondary to permanence. Speed mattered less than endurance. These priorities feel unfamiliar, making interpretation difficult. In this sense, mystery is not a failure of knowledge. It is a signal of difference. The pyramids reflect a worldview that does not map neatly onto modern categories. They remind us that intelligence does not always express itself through written formulas or machines. It can express itself through form, repetition, and patience. As these layers of mystery accumulate, a pattern emerges. The pyramids were not built to be fully understood by distant observers. They were built to endure, to signify, and to remain. The questions they raise may never fully settle, not because answers are impossible, but because the structures operate on timescales that exceed explanation. They invite contemplation rather than resolution. And it is within this unresolved space that the pyramids continue to hold attention, not as puzzles to be solved, but as presences to be encountered. When pyramids are mentioned, Egypt dominates the imagination. Yet pyramids are not unique to one land, one culture, or one moment in history. Across continents and across centuries, humans repeatedly arrived at the same architectural solution. Stone or earth structures, rising upward, narrowing as they ascend, anchored firmly to the ground. The repetition of this form, emerging independently in distant societies, is one of the most intriguing patterns in human history. In Central America, pyramids took on a different character. Built primarily by the Maya, the Aztec, and other civilizations, these structures were not tombs in the Egyptian sense. They were platforms, stages for ritual, ceremony, and public life. Their steep steps led upward toward temples where offerings were made, calendars were observed, and authority was displayed. Unlike the smooth faces of Egyptian pyramids, Mesoamerican pyramids emphasized ascent. Steps were not hidden but exaggerated. Movement upward was part of their meaning. Climbing the structure was an act, not just a path. The pyramid became a journey rather than a sealed monument. These pyramids were often rebuilt over time. New layers were constructed directly over older ones, encasing the past within the present. This practice created structures that contained multiple historical phases within a single form. The pyramid became a physical record of continuity, renewal, and transformation. Astronomy played a central role in many of these structures. Alignments with solstices, equinoxes, and planetary cycles are well documented. Shadows, light, and seasonal movement interacted with architecture in deliberate ways. The pyramid functioned as both building and calendar. In South America, pyramidal forms appeared again, though with distinct materials and purposes. Along the coast of Peru, long before the Inca, cultures such as the Norte Chico built massive platform mounds. These were among the earliest large-scale constructions in the Americas. Made primarily of stone and earth, they suggest organized labor and shared belief long before widespread pottery or writing. These early pyramidal structures were not centered on individual rulers. Instead, they appear to have supported communal activity. Ritual, gathering, and coordination seem to have been their primary functions. The pyramid here was not a symbol of singular power, but of collective identity. Further south, Andean cultures incorporated terraced forms that echoed pyramidal geometry. While adapted to mountainous terrain, the logic remained similar: wide bases, rising platforms, and controlled ascent. Architecture responded to landscape, yet arrived at familiar solutions. In Asia, pyramid-like structures emerged in varied forms. In China, large earthen burial mounds were constructed for emperors and nobility. Though often described as tumuli rather than pyramids, their geometry follows the same principles: broad bases, sloping sides, and deliberate orientation within the landscape. Many of these structures were aligned with cardinal directions and integrated into larger funerary complexes. Their purpose was not public ritual, but cosmological order. The emperor's resting place was positioned within a symbolic map of the universe. The pyramid form here expressed harmony between earth, heaven, and authority. In Southeast Asia, Temple mountains such as those built by the Khmer civilization adopted stepped, pyramidal layouts. These structures were designed to represent sacred mountains, believed to be the dwelling places of gods. Ascending the temple mirrored spiritual ascent. Architecture became cosmology made visible. Stone was carved into terraces, each level carrying symbolic meaning. The pyramid form organized space hierarchically, guiding movement from the mundane to the sacred. This logic appears again and again across cultures that never contacted one another. In Africa beyond Egypt, pyramidal and pyramid-like structures also appear. In Nubia, dozens of smaller, steeper pyramids were built as royal tombs. Though influenced by Egypt, they developed their own distinct style. Narrow bases, sharp angles, and clustered arrangements created a different visual language. Elsewhere on the continent, earthen pyramidal mounds served ritual and social purposes. These structures were often temporary, rebuilt across generations, emphasizing process rather than permanence. Even so, the choice of form remains consistent. What unites these global examples is not technique, material, or belief, but geometry. The pyramid is inherently stable. It distributes weight efficiently. It resists collapse. For societies working without advanced tools, this form offered durability without requiring complex engineering. Yet stability alone does not explain repetition. Humans could have built wide platforms, towers, or domes. Instead, they repeatedly chose a form that rises, narrows, and points upward. This suggests symbolic resonance as much as practical reasoning. Across cultures, height was associated with power, divinity, and separation from the ordinary world. Building upward created distance between sacred space and daily life. The pyramid formalized this separation. It structured meaning into space. The act of ascent appears again and again. Whether through steps, ramps, or terraces, movement upward mattered. The body experienced the structure, not just the eye. Architecture guided perception, effort, and attention. Another shared element is visibility. Pyramids were meant to be seen. They dominated landscapes, serving as reference points. They anchored communities spatially and symbolically. Even when their functions differed, their presence communicated permanence and intention. The question that emerges is unavoidable. How did societies separated by oceans and millennia arrive at the same form? The answer does not require shared origin. Instead, it points to shared human conditions. Early societies faced similar challenges: limited tools, large populations, the desire to build something that would last, the need to express belief, authority, or collective identity. Within these constraints, the pyramid emerged as a reliable solution. This convergence does not diminish mystery, it deepens it. The pyramid becomes less a cultural artifact and more a human one. It reflects patterns of thought that transcend geography. Still, differences matter. Egyptian pyramids emphasized sealing and permanence. Mesoamerican pyramids emphasized ritual and renewal. Asian pyramidal forms emphasized harmony and order. The same geometry carried different meanings. This suggests that the pyramid is not a message, but a medium, a form capable of expressing diverse ideas. Its power lies in its adaptability. As we move from one continent to another, the pyramid shifts function but retains essence. It organizes space, it directs movement, it signals importance. These qualities appear universal. The global distribution of pyramids raises questions not about lost civilizations, but about shared human intuition. When faced with the desire to build something meaningful and lasting, humans repeatedly chose the same answer. This realization reframes mystery. The question is no longer who taught whom, but why this form works so well. The pyramid becomes a mirror reflecting how humans think about time, effort, and significance. And as we continue across the world, even more variations appear. some grand, some modest, some built of stone, others of earth, some standing, others eroded into the landscape. All echo the same fundamental idea. In the next part, we will move deeper into these comparisons. We will look at similarities that feel almost uncomfortable and differences that matter more than they appear. Patterns that invite curiosity without demanding belief. Because the story of pyramids does not belong to one place. It belongs to humanity. When pyramids appear again and again across the world, the first question is often about connection. Did knowledge travel? Was there contact? Or did different societies, separated by oceans and centuries, arrive at the same solution independently? The evidence points toward convergence rather than transmission. Similar human conditions produced similar outcomes. Early civilizations faced comparable limits. Tools were simple, materials were heavy, labor was collective. Under these constraints, the pyramid offered an answer that was both practical and symbolic. Its shape distributes weight efficiently, allowing height without collapse. At the same time, it communicates permanence, order, and ascent. Human perception plays a role. Height has always carried meaning. Elevated spaces feel closer to what is unseen and distant from the ordinary. By narrowing as they rise, pyramids draw attention upward, guiding the eye and the body toward a focal point. This effect is psychological as much as architectural. Symmetry reinforces this response. Balanced forms suggest stability and control. In uncertain environments, such signals matter. The pyramid's geometry conveys reliability. It looks as though it will endure, even before it proves that it can. Across cultures, the pyramid also establishes a center. It anchors space. Communities organize around it, orient themselves by it, and define boundaries in relation to it. The structure becomes a reference point in both landscape and memory. These shared functions explain why pyramids serve different purposes without changing form. In one place, they housed the dead. In another, they elevated ritual. Elsewhere, they marked time through light and shadow. The shape remained constant while meaning adapted. This adaptability is key. The pyramid is not a message with a single interpretation. It is a framework capable of holding many ideas. It can represent authority, devotion, continuity, or cosmology, depending on context. It is within this flexibility that more speculative ideas emerge. If pyramids appear everywhere, some ask whether a hidden source exists. This is where the question of non-human involvement enters popular imagination. The idea that pyramids were built by beings from other worlds is not supported by evidence. No tools, materials, or construction methods point beyond human capability. Archaeology shows gradual development, trial and error, and learning over time. So why does the idea persist? Because it resolves discomfort. Accepting that ancient humans achieved such feats forces a re-evaluation of human potential. It challenges modern assumptions about progress and superiority. The extraterrestrial explanation simplifies the story. It replaces complexity with mystery. Instead of asking how societies organized labor, sustained belief, and transmitted knowledge, it shifts attention to an external cause. Yet this shift removes what is most remarkable. The pyramids are impressive not because they are inexplicable, but because they are human. They demonstrate what coordination, patience, and shared purpose can produce without advanced technology. In this sense, the appeal of the alien theory reveals more about modern psychology than ancient history. It reflects a reluctance to credit the past with ingenuity equal to the present. When viewed globally, pyramids suggest something quieter and more profound. Across cultures, humans repeatedly sought to fix meaning in space and time. They built upward not to escape the earth, but to mark their place upon it. These structures were not designed to be solved. They were designed to last. Their endurance invites interpretation, not resolution. Each culture added its own layer of meaning, and each observer brings another. The pyramid, then, is less a riddle and more a statement. It says that humans, when faced with uncertainty, build. They organize, they reach upward, and they leave behind forms that outlive explanation. This is why pyramids continue to matter, even when their builders are gone. They remind us that some human impulses are constant: the desire to be remembered, the urge to impose order, the hope that effort can outlast time. And it is from this recognition, not mystery alone, that their power ultimately comes. Pyramids still matter because they refuse to stay in the past. They are ancient, yet they remain present, not as ruins that belong only to history, but as structures that continue to shape how humans think about time, effort, and meaning. Even after centuries of study, they do not feel finished. They feel active. One reason pyramids endure in the human mind is scale, not just physical size, but temporal scale. These structures were designed to last longer than any individual, any generation, even any civilization. They were built with an awareness of time that feels unfamiliar today. Modern architecture often measures success in decades. Pyramids measure it in millennia. This long-term thinking changes how we relate to them. A pyramid does not invite urgency. It invites patience. Standing before one, the sense of time stretches. Human life feels brief by comparison. This contrast is unsettling, but also grounding. Pyramids also matter because they represent commitment. They required sustained effort across years, sometimes decades. Thousands of people worked toward a result most would never personally benefit from. This level of collective focus is rare. It challenges modern assumptions about motivation and reward. In many ways, pyramids reveal what a society chooses to value. Resources were not directed toward immediate comfort, but toward permanence. Labor was invested not in speed, but in endurance. These priorities suggest a worldview in which legacy outweighed convenience. Another reason pyramids remain relevant is their clarity of form. The pyramid is immediately recognizable. Its geometry is simple, yet powerful. A wide base supports a narrowing ascent, creating a sense of stability and direction. This clarity makes the structure easy to remember and difficult to ignore. Unlike many ancient buildings, pyramids do not rely on decoration to communicate importance. Their presence alone is enough. This restraint gives them a timeless quality. They do not feel tied to a specific aesthetic trend. They feel elemental. Pyramids also occupy a unique position between function and symbol. They were not purely practical, nor purely abstract. They served roles, burial, ritual, orientation, but they also conveyed ideas: order, continuity, ascent, balance. Ideas remain legible even when cultural context fades. Because of this, pyramids speak across time. A modern observer may not share ancient beliefs, yet still feel the intended impact. Awe does not require translation. Scale, symmetry, and endurance communicate directly. Pyramids matter because they resist complete explanation. Even as knowledge grows, questions remain. This does not diminish them. It sustains engagement. Structures that are fully understood eventually lose their pull. Pyramids retain attention because they sit at the edge of comprehension. This balance between knowledge and mystery mirrors human experience itself. We understand enough to function, but not enough to feel complete certainty. Pyramids reflect this condition in stone. Another reason pyramids persist in cultural memory is their silence. They do not explain themselves. There are no inscriptions describing their full meaning, no instructions left behind. This absence invites interpretation. Each era projects its own concerns onto them. Ancient Egyptians likely understood pyramids differently than we do. So did later visitors, travelers, and scholars. Each layer of interpretation adds to their significance rather than replacing it. The pyramids accumulate meaning instead of losing it. Pyramids also matter because they reveal the limits of technology-centered thinking. They were built without advanced machines, yet achieved results that still impress modern engineers. This challenges the idea that progress is linear or purely technical. They show that organization, patience, and shared belief can substitute for technology. That intelligence can express itself through coordination rather than invention. This lesson remains relevant in a world that often prioritizes tools over systems. The emotional response pyramids provoke is another key factor. People describe feeling small, calm, unsettled, or deeply focused in their presence. These reactions are not accidental. They result from scale, proportion, and environment working together. Such responses suggest that pyramids were designed to affect perception, not just serve function. They shape how space is experienced. They slow movement. They quiet attention. In this sense, they resemble environments rather than objects. Pyramids also matter because they blur boundaries between architecture and landscape, between the living and the dead, between the human and the cosmic. Their form rises from the earth but points toward the sky, connecting two realms symbolically. This bridging role resonates across cultures. It helps explain why the pyramid form reappears globally. It offers a way to express relationships that are otherwise difficult to represent physically. Another enduring aspect is the way pyramids frame human effort. They make visible what coordination can achieve. Each block represents a small action. Together, they form something far larger than any individual contribution. This accumulation mirrors many human systems, from language to culture itself. In a modern world defined by speed and change, pyramids offer a counterpoint. They do not respond. They do not adapt. They endure. This stillness feels powerful precisely because it contrasts with constant motion. Pyramids also matter because they expose modern blind spots. When people struggle to accept that ancient societies built them, the discomfort reveals assumptions about intelligence, progress, and worth. The pyramids challenge these assumptions quietly but persistently. They remind us that complexity does not always look modern, that knowledge does not always leave written records, that skill can exist without documentation. These reminders broaden how we define intelligence. The continued fascination with pyramids is not about solving them. It is about returning to them. Each visit, physical or intellectual, offers a slightly different experience. New questions replace old ones. The structure remains the same. This constancy allows pyramids to act as anchors. They stabilize historical imagination. They provide reference points in an otherwise shifting narrative of human achievement. Even popular speculation plays a role in their endurance. While many theories lack evidence, their persistence shows how strongly pyramids capture attention. Few structures inspire such sustained curiosity. Importantly, pyramids do not demand belief. They do not require acceptance of a single explanation. They allow uncertainty. This openness makes them accessible across cultures and eras. In this way, pyramids function less like answers and more like mirrors. They reflect the concerns, values, and questions of whoever stands before them. As long as humans ask about time, purpose, and legacy, pyramids will remain relevant. Their material presence ensures they cannot be ignored. Their silence ensures they cannot be exhausted. And so they continue to matter, not because they are ancient, but because they remain unresolved in ways that feel deeply human. As the story of pyramids reaches its end, attention shifts away from how they were built and toward why they continue to matter. Not as ancient curiosities, but as structures that remain active within modern thought. The pyramids are not finished subjects. They are ongoing ones. One reason is that they are still being studied. Archaeologists, engineers, and physicists continue to measure, scan, and model these structures. New technologies reveal internal voids, construction details, and stress patterns that were previously invisible. Each discovery answers one question while quietly creating several new ones. This continuous research keeps pyramids present rather than historical. Unlike many ancient structures that have been fully cataloged, pyramids resist closure. They do not settle into a final explanation. They evolve as our tools and perspectives evolve. Modern engineering still looks to pyramids for reference. Their stability, load distribution, and longevity are studied in relation to contemporary design challenges. The pyramid remains one of the most efficient large-scale structural forms ever realized. This is not symbolic admiration, but practical analysis. Pyramids also matter because they exist outside controlled environments. They are not preserved behind glass. They stand exposed to weather, time, and erosion, yet continue to hold their form. This real-world endurance gives them authority that reconstructions and models cannot replicate. Another concrete reason for their relevance is measurement. The pyramids are still measured, remeasured, and debated. Dimensions, angles, and alignments are refined with each generation of tools. Minor discrepancies continue to produce discussion, not because they undermine understanding, but because they sharpen it. Importantly, these debates remain open-ended. There is no single governing theory that closes the subject. This openness is unusual in archaeology and contributes to sustained interest. The pyramids behave less like solved problems and more like stable questions. They also continue to shape modern culture in measurable ways. Pyramids appear in architecture, logos, currency, and urban design. Their form is repeatedly reused because it communicates durability and order without explanation. This is a functional inheritance, not just an aesthetic one. The continued presence of pyramids in documentaries, research papers, and popular media reflects this balance between clarity and uncertainty. They offer enough information to ground discussion, but enough ambiguity to keep attention alive. This balance affects how people engage with them psychologically. Unlike subjects that demand resolution, pyramids allow curiosity without pressure. One can learn without needing to conclude. This makes them especially compatible with slow, reflective attention. Pyramids also matter because they expose limits. Not limits of intelligence, but limits of certainty. They show that even with abundant data, some questions remain interpretive. This challenges modern expectations that all problems can be closed. The fact that archaeologists are still working on pyramids today reinforces this point. New surveys do not replace old ones. They sit alongside them. Knowledge accumulates horizontally rather than vertically. Understanding expands without ceiling. This ongoing process gives pyramids a unique temporal role. They connect ancient labor with modern inquiry. The same structures shaped by hands thousands of years ago are now shaped by scanners, simulations, and debate. They also continue to produce new questions precisely because they are so well studied. Familiarity does not exhaust them. It sharpens awareness of what remains unresolved. In this way, pyramids matter not because they hide answers, but because they generate questions responsibly. They do not collapse into speculation, nor do they surrender to certainty. They maintain tension. This tension is productive. It keeps the subject alive without distorting it. It allows mystery to exist alongside knowledge. As long as pyramids remain under study, they remain relevant. As long as each discovery opens another line of inquiry, they resist becoming static monuments of the past. They also matter because they resist ownership. No single discipline fully claims them. Archaeology measures them. Engineering tests them. Astronomy compares them. Psychology observes their effect, yet none of these perspectives replaces the others. The pyramids remain larger than the tools used to study them. This shared incompleteness keeps interpretation alive. Each generation approaches the pyramids with new questions, shaped by its own concerns and capabilities. What once centered on power and burial later shifted to engineering, then to symbolism, and now to systems and perception. The structure stays the same, but the questions change. In this way, pyramids act as long-term mirrors. They reflect not only the culture that built them, but the cultures that study them afterward. What we ask of the pyramids often reveals more about us than about them. Their silence allows this reflection without resistance. They stand as reminders that some human achievements are not meant to be finished intellectually. They are meant to be returned to.